and welcome back to Passsive Gaming and a new video on the channel. Now I don't normally do review type videos, but thought it might be helpful for people to get my take on Last Epoch as both an ARPG veteran and an addicted Path of Exile player. Now I have owned Last Epoch since it came available on Steam in early access, but I definitely class myself as a very casual player. I've leveled a few characters to monoliths, but not really pushed past the first couple, as I always re-rolled into a different character, and I really only understood the basics of crafting. This video is really from a new player perspective. I will add I also played offline mode, so I'm not going to get into the server issues that have been there for online characters. So let's start with gameplay, combat, and character progression. I'm not going to talk about the storyline, as most RPGs have really generic and bland stories, and this one from my experience is not really any different. I do however skip a lot of dialogue in these type of games. A particular shout out has to go to the soundtrack. The musical score in this game is amazing and very close to Path of Exile, which in my opinion has some of the best musical compositions in all the games I've played in my very long gaming life. The music really helps immerse you in the world, and it's used really well to set scenes and inform the player of what's happening. The sound effects are not so remarkable, but they do a good enough job. The voice acting I found to be pretty wooden and in some cases really monotone and drone. However, I don't think it's a story-led game, so I don't mind this too much if maybe they're concentrated on other aspects of the game. Let's move on to the core of the game, which is combat, character customization, and loot. So picking a class is simple and straightforward. On the character select screen, you can see the skills that each class and subclass has access to, so you can already start planning your character out even on that screen. Skills work very similar to games like Diablo 4 and other ARPGs, in that you need to level your character or the subclass to get access to specific skills. The aspect I really like about the skills is the diverse way in which you can play them. In Path of Exile, you change and improve your skills by adding in support gems. In Last Epoch, each skill has its own skill tree, and you earn points as you gain experience. It's a bit daunting at first, as you need to go through the entire tree and try and work out what pathing you can take. However, it's nothing compared to the horror of opening up the PoE skill tree for the first time, and respecing is really easy. The great thing I found so far is almost any skill can be used and made viable early game, as it is a fairly easy game until you get to empowered monoliths. So as long as you pick synergistic skills, trees, and build around the items that you're using, it really is impossible to fail when you're going through the early stages. However, I do come from an ARPG background, so this stuff sort of comes as second nature, and it might not be as simple if you're a brand new player to the genre. However, this is probably the most new player friendly game I've come across in a while. I am glad they do have fairly complex systems when you get to the end, compared to the dumbed down gameplay that you get in something like Diablo 4, and also maybe the complexity and the blockers that you get in Path of Exile. Your character also comes along with a passive tree per specialization. These are pretty generic for the most part, and they're a bit like maybe Paragon points in Diablo, and that you just put more stats into more areas you want to focus on, but it was super easy to understand. A massive plus point for me is how easy it is to respec. You can respec your passive tree with gold, and you can despecialize your skills for free. You do have to earn the ranks again, but for your new specialization you do get boosted XP based on the progress you're on, and the higher level your character gets, the more points you start with when you despecialize a skill. Overall, I think the systems hit a really good balance of casual versus grinder, which is perfect for someone like me, as I sit exactly between these two brackets. Crafting is hands down the best crafting I've seen in any ARPG by a long way. They have really set a high bar for other ARPGs going forward. The way this system's been implemented, it does mean that a lot of items of the ground could potentially be valuable, as you get exalted items, which for PoE players are fractured items. You can add mods to, change mods, you can fracture different mods, you can even combine uniques and rares at very end game. This is definitely the system that's going to keep me engaged with the game, as it really does mean the sky's the limit in regards to gearing and character power. That covers off the main systems in the game that I wanted to talk about, so let's go through the campaign and the end game based on my very early experience. So this had plus points and negatives for me. The campaign I felt was a little bit too easy, but it was quite fun. Some of the zones are a bit repetitive though, and I did feel that the storyline went on for a bit too long. There were some zones I really enjoyed and others that I didn't. Now it's my understanding that the story is still not finished, and I'm not sure how I'd feel about an even longer campaign, considering the storyline is pretty generic. However, as with games like Path of Exile, I'm sure with practice comes much quicker leveling at new cycle or character start. I also understand there's ways to skip campaign sections, which should make leveling ults nicer, especially with some decent uniques. I'm not going to touch massively on endgame as I'm still working my way through the early empowered monoliths, but essentially there's 3 things you can do at endgame from what I can see. There's dungeons, battle arena, and monoliths. I think 95% of the time you're going to spend it in monoliths as it's more fun and it's better for target farming gear. I did enjoy the dungeons and felt they all offered something a little bit different, and monoliths are fairly engaging and quick to run. This is quite important in the speed because it allows casual players to actually feel that they can log in for an hour and actually get some progress made rather than need 2 or 3 hours to actually settle down and play. Now there are certainly gear checks in the game, and I found my first one to be when I had to complete the level 75 monolith and kill Lagon. This is easily the hardest fight in the campaign, and it's the same in monoliths. It's the only boss that I actually had to go away and re-gear. All of the other ones all the way through to get into empowered I found fairly comfortable. The fight is an actually decent fight. Its mechanics are very easy to work out, but it can get a bit overwhelming if you've got a slow character or you're slightly lacking in either defense or damage. I got my ass kicked the first time I rushed to him, so I decided to complete the timelines on the left hand side, and by the time I hit level 70 it went smoothly. Now even though the endgame is not hugely expansive for launch, I think it actually offers quite a lot for a seasonal game, and considering it's the launch I think there is quite a lot of content available, and if Future Cycles adds more endgame activities rather than just small things like gear or slight changes you can make to your character, I can definitely see myself coming back to this game time and time again. The one thing I do feel people are doing slightly wrong is when people talk about there isn't a ton of endgame, they're comparing it to Path of Exile either currently or at launch, and they're both very, very different places. When Path of Exile came out, it was around 10 years ago, and it wasn't anything that had a ton of content in it. Yes, Last Epoch has just launched, so it's not going to have the content that PoE has, but it is competing with it. I think when Path of Exile 2 comes out, that's going to be the real competition for the game, and we'll see how much content is available there, but I do think Last Epoch at launch has got a pretty decent amount of content that you can complete. So we'll just talk about a few bugs, talk about generally my opinion on the game and the new guild options introduced in 1.0. So I am playing offline, so I can only talk about the Circle of Fortune guild, and I do love the implementation of this. It's pretty much a carbon copy of Prophecies in Path of Exile. I would like more information within the prophecies. It's sometimes a bit hard to know where or how to encounter the enemies, so I found that a lot of the time my prophecies are just proccing randomly rather than me target farming things, but that might come with more experience. There's a few annoying bugs that I come across. I don't know if this particular one's been fixed, but whenever you teleport back to town, you reset whatever encounter you're in. So in the campaign, I was picking up way too much loot, so I was having to go back to town to sell items. A couple of times I killed a big boss, teleported out because I ran out of space. When I put stuff in my stash and went back, the boss had reset, and the ones towards the end of the campaign can take a few minutes to complete, and that was a little bit frustrating. There was also a few times where the door that was meant to go to the next zone just didn't open, so I had to teleport back to town, go back, and it would reset. These are things that I'm sure will get fixed, and they were only minor annoyances. And as I say, I have learned that really the items aren't worth anything gold-wise. You pick up more gold as you go along, so once you've got the gear you need, you really don't need to be picking stuff up to sell. The weird B promotion that they had was also really annoying. I think they've stopped it now. They essentially said as a peace offering to players because the servers are so bad, they would give them some B MTX if they got referrals from 3 people. This would mean you'd have to get them from people that haven't yet played the game because there won't be enough to go around. And I found it really strange that they're trying to encourage people to come to the game when they had so many problems with their live servers, and all you got in Reddit, chats and forums was people spamming for B referrals, and it did get pretty annoying. However, the devs seem to be really communicative. I've got no experience in development, so I can't comment on what they could or could not have done to make launch a bit smoother, but I think they're doing a good job at trying to fix things. They seem extremely passionate about the game and willing to engage with the community, which would mean the game's got a great chance of long-term success. So overall, I'm really enjoying the game, and I'll probably carry on before I need to start prepping my next Path of Exile League starter. In summary, the combat, although good, still feels a little bit floaty. It's really hard to tell what attacks will hit you hard and what you can just ignore. There are sometimes big telegraphed areas that do 0 damage and tiny attacks that do an absolute ton of damage. I would just like combat to be a bit more impactful, and if something telegraphs on the ground, I know it's dangerous, and auto attacks and things like that, as long as I'm geared defensively, shouldn't really cause me any problems. In terms of character, gear progression and build variety, it looks to be pretty decent, and as I've said, the crafting is really, really good. I'm already finding myself wanting to go back and level up a different type of character because I enjoyed the playthrough so much. However, I think one of the reasons for that is I get a little bit bored of just running monoliths over and over again with no real goal other than grinding gear. So I feel like it's more fun for me to go back and level up another character, but that's just the way that I play. So overall, I definitely got my money's worth, and it's a game I would certainly recommend for people who like this style of game. However, as I mentioned, there are still pretty big problems in some areas with the online servers, but you do have the option to play offline with a few limitations, and that's how I always planned to play anyway, because I always wanted to play solo and I always wanted to take the Circle Guild for SSF. If I do continue playing it and I get more experience in the game, I'll certainly start bringing out some guide videos, but I'm not there yet, and I don't want to bring videos out with build guides and things like that because I don't really know the game well enough, and I'm sure there's people that have done much better attempts at builds than my first couple. That's it for the video. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and see you in the next one.